It's time for Market Explainer, your number one business news podcast. Hosted by Danny and the big man. And it starts right now.
So this next story, I think I went through our notes to see if we had discussed it at length. I don't think we've done a segment on it before, but we certainly mentioned it. The Great Resignation continues. 4.4 million Americans quit their jobs last month, that being February, right?
Yep.
That's a lot of people to have quit their jobs.
Okay,
so
let's back up a little further than that, because if you think that's a lot of people, we've had 4 million people quit their jobs every month since July of last year.
Right.
So it's not just 4 million last month.
Right.
It's 4 million per month since July of last year.
Right. So what's interesting is, and this is something as a guy who's a self-taught economist that I find it kind of confounding, which is there's roughly 2 job openings for every unemployed person out there. I read that statistic somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's a
little point in it's like 1.8, 1.7 or
yeah.
Whatever. But yes, essentially there's 2 job openings for every one person out there looking for a job.
Right. And there's some people who have just dropped out of the job market altogether. But the reason I find this interesting is there was another article from USA Today that some workers feel like they have screwed themselves over by doing this. And I read the article. And the Great Resignation is a real thing. It's really happening.
It is.
Some people believe it is tied to a conspiracy from the World Economic Forum. I'm not saying I believe that.
No.
Or that I don't believe that, but I'm just saying that there's reasons that people come to that conclusion. And what some of these people are saying is, I regret having quit my job for different reasons. Hey, ding dong. A lot of these people left their jobs, went and got jobs with much higher pay, and they're like, I have to do a lot of work now.
Yeah, I have to do more work now than I did last. You're making twice as much money you did. Look, this is one of those stories where, first of all, it's an extrapolation story. And what I mean by that is this Harris Polls is the name of the company. Right. Harris Polls does a lot of different polls. This is not, you know what I mean? Harris Polls only talk to 2,000 of these people.
Right.
We're talking about 4 million have quit every single month since July of last year. They talked to 2,000 people and have extrapolated out those percentages.
Correct.
Now, look, they're not the only ones that do this kind of thing. We do it on a lot of different things, right? But to say out of just the 2,000 people that they talked to that this is by any means
representative
of the 4 million times 7, you know what I mean?
Whatever.
The 200, a lot, 28 million people that have, you know what I mean, switched jobs or whatever. My point, though, is so we can't extrapolate that out. But what we always know, look, true business acumens, these sayings that you've heard a billion times in your life, for example, the grass is not always greener on the other side, is true, period. If you quit your job because you got another job making twice as much money and you don't like that new job, that is the definition of the grass is not always greener. Now, that does not mean that you shouldn't have taken that new job.
Right.
That depends on you as the person. What is that new job? How much do you not like what you were doing? All of these things factor into your individual wants and needs that you need out of a job.
Right. And I think the problem we have in this society is there's all of this, what's the word I'm looking for? You have all of these positive feelings about yourself. I'm forgetting what the phrase is, but no self-awareness, right? We have my generation of people have bought into this pop psychology notion of, well, you have to feel good about yourself. You
realize that it's the millennials that are driving this entire thing. The Great Resignation, it's millennials that are resigning. Okay, it's the millennials that are changing jobs, and it's the millennials that are finding the fact that they're not happy working more for more money.
Right.
Okay, if we're extrapolating out of this particular poll, that's what we figure out. It's millennials driving. Now, again, you can make the argument the millennials should be the one driving this because they're the ones stuck in these crappy retail jobs. They're the ones stuck in these crappy
Right.
paying IT jobs, and you know what I mean, or whatever. That didn't do any of the hey, maybe I can make more money for what I'm doing at this job because it was too scary, and
Right.
now
Right.
I'm going to
Right.
go along with all these other people, right? Um,
So,
Go
so
ahead.
this kind of in the last segment, I mentioned that I know a few people who are selling their homes to time the market because they feel like the
Mm-hmm.
market is so high right now. They're going to wait for 2 years, go rent, and they're going to try to time the market and hopefully get a bigger house at a cheaper price. Now, that's the same thing here. Okay, people having big eyes, thinking that they're making smart decisions because they're hopped up on self esteem, because their teacher from the time they were told from the time they were young that they're special and they're individual and that no one is like them and no one can do. And then they get into this new job. And part of it has to do with the millennials, I call John Stewart driven picture of capitalism, which is the more money you make, the less work you actually do. If you make $150,000 a year, you're probably sitting on your butt, not doing anything. And the reality is, no, 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 no. If you're, I think my estimate is $75,000 a year is the perfect amount of money to make at a job because it's just enough that like they're not making you do menial, boring tasks, but they don't leave a lot of heavy management decisions up to you because it's just not, it's all above your pay grade. So it's a real solid 40-hour a week gig where you have plenty of life balance. And the reality is, I think a lot of millennials are coming to the conclusion that, hey, wait, if I want to, they begrudge their father because my dad was a guy who was working 40 hours at his job, another 25 consulting. Like that's how he put us through
Mm-hmm.
college, bought a house, that's how he did stuff. And then my mom was working, and they have this condescending view of like, I don't just want to work till I'm dead. In Germany, you only have to work 8 hours a month, and they give you like they have this view of like European, like we're going to be European, and everyone should get $1 million and not work. And then they actually go get a job where they make good money, and they can
Mm-hmm.
actually now afford to have the things that they want. And they go, wait, I have to sacrifice time in order to have money. And you go, hey, you just figured out Robert Kiyosaki. Like, what did you? This is, and this is the entire point of part of our show here is we want to encourage entrepreneurship
That's true.
because you cannot, and this is, I have this view of this as a human rights matter of like, hey, listen, there's no reason for you to go. If you want to go be a doctor and you want to commit yourself to 60 hours a week for the rest of your life to be a doctor, God bless. But if all you want is $250,000 a year, there's 1,000 other ways to get you 250 grand a year without being a doctor, without going to medical school. Like there's a million other things we can get you to do. And the great resignation is millennials, again, me, my generation, which I lived and I watched and I witnessed them buy into narratives that are just fake, right? And them
I'm not a
understanding,
millennial. I'm a Gen
right,
Xer. But and I
correct.
don't want to necessarily look. I
Pick
don't want to
on,
bash millennials. Millennials suck. But I don't want to bash them in that. Look, positive thinking,
hey,
treating your kids better.
hey,
Okay,
the
y'all
feeling's
didn't have to go
mutual.
through.
The feeling's mutual. I think millennials suck
No,
too.
I'm a Gen X. You and
That's
Boomers
what I'm
go at it.
saying.
I don't give a crap. All right.
Yeah,
So, but look. So I don't want to blame it squarely on anybody's shoulders. The point is though, I don't know. Sometimes I look at stories like this and go, was this written by corporations? Because here's the way I look at the Great Resignation, right? I look at the Great Resignation as employees versus employer, right? Big business. And the fact is big business to date, meaning while we're recording this in March 22, is in the we're just going to hold out. We're just going to hold out and see how long you can survive
right,
without the job, right?
right,
There are a percentage of people that are leaving their jobs and getting another job. There are a
right,
percentage of people that are getting out of crappy jobs and not getting another job. They're not
right,
finding another job, or they're getting into another job that's just paying them a little bit more right now, while
Right.
those are being pushed up. Because there are companies that are raising their minimum wage, what they pay workers,
Of
all that kind
course.
of stuff, all by the way, passing that on to the consumer, which is what companies do. That's just going to happen. The
Right.
problem that you have right now with these raises is it also, and this again gets into a different economic thing, you also have super high inflation right now.
Yeah.
So you may get a 30% raise because you switch companies, but inflation is up 10%. So you didn't get as much of a raise as you thought just
Right.
because of the month you're living in or the year
Right.
you're living in. Does that
Correct.
make sense? Which people don't take into account, but it is what it is. My point is I've always thought during this great resignation period that companies are just going to wait you out as a whole. They're going to keep just as much staff as they have to have, right?
Right.
And they're going to pay that staff whatever they have to pay them to get them in the door,
Right.
but they're just waiting you out.
Yeah, and so from this USA Today article, some of what people are saying is, well, I thought I was getting hired as this amazing position to write policy papers and whatever, and instead I'm sending off tweets and Facebook posts, and I'm getting paid triple what I used to get paid, and this is a complaint. Like, hey, I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in having a job where I'm doing something. I'm interested in having a job where it appears like I'm doing something. I'm the George Costanza of employees,
A
right?
good Danny getting into the scammy behavior
It's not
again.
scamming. Value is subjective. They hired me to do a somewhat useless job at a pretty high premium, and this happened to me before the pandemic because when the panini started, I was the first guy out the door, which is fine. But you know, it's a thing. I think there's a confluence of factors, which is and I'm seeing this all over Twitter and other places, which is someone bought a house in 1980 and now it's worth for $150,000 and now it's worth 3 million. How am I ever gonna like? And the inflation is, if you account for
Mm-hmm.
inflation, it's a $350,000 house, and then it goes, hey, you're talking about San Francisco. Did anything else happen in San Francisco between 1980 and 2022?
Right.
Like this became a place to live because of the economy and economy in San Francisco. So a lot of millennials are believing that they're never going to own a home. And hey, guess what? Maybe it's that's fine. Maybe you
Danny
take
doesn't know what he's talking about. He always brings up that he's not a fan of ownership when there's other things that you can do with your money and yada
yes,
yada. But
but
no,
so what I'm getting at is the economy is, listen, we've learned that with the internet, and the great economist, I forget his name, Paul Krugman, said in the 90s, he said that the internet will have the economic impact of the fax machine and it will be insignificant on impacting the economy. And here we are with FANG, right? All of these, with the exception of
mm-hmm,
Apple, Facebook, Google, all these
mm-hmm,
huge companies, Amazon, Netflix, billion-dollar unicorns because of the internet. And
mm-hmm.
there is a method for you to get out there and learn a skill, whether it's selling tchotchke on Etsy,
Etsy.
or,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Gary Vee, say whatever you want about Gary Vee. The fact that he goes garage sailing and said, hey, I paid $260 for these Japanese comic books worth $8,000. And the question is, can you make $100,000 a year doing that? Probably. Like there's
If
probably
that's your hustle, if that's what your
that
dedication is. The
right.
problem is like always, most people, not all,
Yeah.
feel comfortable. This is why people don't change jobs, by the way, is
Right.
fear of the other side, right? That the
Right.
fear of the other, that if I let this paycheck that I know I'm coming on Friday, if I
Yep.
let that go for another company, it's not
Right.
going to work out, or I'm going to get fired in 3 months, or whatever. And it
Right.
keeps them. And guess what? Companies that do nothing to veer you away from this thought process either, right?
Right.
By constantly tell you you're easily replaceable and that a monkey could do your job or whatever it may be that they tell
Right.
you. But so people have this fear of entrepreneurship. They have this fear of not
Right.
knowing where that next paycheck is coming from or when it's coming from because they don't want to go through the 6 months or a year or 18 months that it takes to accomplish and get over that hurdle in business where you have
Right.
regular customers like on Etsy, right? Or regular business or regular
Right.
revenues or whatever it may be. They're just not willing. Now, I will say that Panini made some of that easier because you figured out that you could take that time because you were at home anyway.
Right. So
right?
here's the other thing. We're doing a podcast which started at the end of 2020,
Hmm.
and I was always against doing this, Zoom podcast. Because and listen, we've done one or two in person. They're
Yep,
better. They are
they are
better in
better.
person.
They are.
Because sometimes you'll see us on the show talking over each other, and that's not me being rude and interrupting. That's like there's a delay, and what?
No,
What are
that's
you saying?
definitely you.
Well, no, I'm just saying I am being rude and interrupting, but I can blame it on the delay, which there isn't really a delay.
Ah, yes, yes. There is a little bit of a
But
dip.
when I saw that, hey, um, Jimmy Kimmel, who probably makes $25 million a year, is doing this from his house. I guess I can do this from my house.
That was
So,
the best thing I'll remember about the Panini going forward is that
yeah,
even big companies, big corporations, because there was only so many weeks you could go without Jimmy Kimmel and you know what I mean,
yeah,
the Daily Show and all these that big companies had to essentially use the infrastructure of technology to
yeah,
go, and then you're looking at it and you're going, yes, 25 million. That guy's getting paid the same, sitting at home walking
right,
over to his office that is probably
yeah,
the company just turned around and spent $50,000 on, right, with
yeah,
technology and stuff like that, in their home, and he just has to walk over, sit down, and do right there in his house what he was doing in front of. That took all day, by the way, to get makeup and you know what I mean, and do all these different things and go to 3 different meetings about that night's show and
right, right,
you know
right,
what I mean and all that. They paid him the same amount sitting at home working
correct,
probably a 20-25% fraction of the amount of time.
right. And what it was a great leveling of the playing field for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is over, right? I think
No.
people, and part of me wonders conspiratorially, it was just written by corporations to say just stay at your job. You don't want to go try this new thing out.
Exactly.
And here's what I'm
I
saying.
have that same question, right? Like, what purpose does this article serve?
So here's Danny's advice, not from Market Explainer, not from anywhere else. Stay at your job. If you're getting the itch, it's time to go. Go start a side hustle. Go start another business. Because some people will go start a business and learn entrepreneurship isn't for them. And that's a good piece of information to have. Because once you have that information to go, entrepreneurship isn't for me, you can now do your job without thinking in the back of your head, man, I could be making so much more money doing a side hustle or whatever. And you go, listen, I can't live with the anxiety of not knowing. I have a rent payment, I got a mortgage payment coming, and I have to go out there this weekend to a garage sale and I got to find something worth money and I got to sell it in so many days. Hey, I know somebody who started a car dealership and floated a couple of checks on some wholesale cars and said, oh, there were some banking errors, right? It had to sell the cars to pay. But the point is, there are people like that, like me, like Big Man, who have the stomach for that risk. And if you don't, it's a good piece of information to have because it changes your perception of how you do your job, and maybe it can help you refocus in on, hey, wait, I don't like entrepreneurship for these reasons. I'm going to go be a better employee, and I can
Mm-hmm.
do that this way. And without that information, you're always going to be thinking, what if, what if, what if? Don't be plagued by what ifs. Don't be, go find out, get the information.
I agree with Danny, except for the very first statement. Don't keep your job if you're in a crappy situation. Keep your job if you've got a good boss and work for a good company and do something that you at least semi enjoy that doesn't make you want to, slit your wrists at the end of the night. But
Right.
what I am saying though is if you're in a crappy situation with a crappy manager that treats you, you know what I mean, horribly,
Poorly.
you tell them to jam it and go get one of those 2 jobs that are available to everybody else,
Right.
even if it's at the same pay. Right? I'm saying the grass may be greener on the other side if you're in a
And
crappy
maybe.
situation.
And the reason I say keep the crappy situation and start a business on the side is because you're already there. You're already in the situation. You're already living it.
I
Might as
agree with
well.
that, whether it's a good situation or a bad situation. Now,
Right.
that
But
part. That's why I agree with
so
all of that part, the
yeah,
entrepreneur part.
so I respond better to negative motivation. So for me, it's like I got such a crappy job. It's going to make me do that job a little more efficiently so I get out of there on time. Because like the last time I had an office gig, I was the first guy at the desk, not because of like I'm really happy to be here, but because I need to be the last guy. I need to be the guy first out the door because I have more important things to do at home on my business. So,
Well,
but
know thyself. You need to know
yeah,
what motivates you and that kind of stuff.
true.
All right, what's our last story there, Danny? Or I'm sorry, what's our last sponsor?
Yes.
For
So our last sponsor for this show is Avenue Lucky. Avenue Lucky is my agency that develops websites and provides done-for-you marketing services. You can go to avenuelucky.com and check that out today. And if you go check out our in-house projects, you can learn about all the other sponsors that we've had here that I own.